Hello, everyone, and welcome to another highly controversial, button-pushing episode of Two Gays, One Episode. I'm Alex.
And I'm GoatJesus.
And today, we're going to finally finish the main story, our main story discussion of End of Evangelion, the movie, the legend, the something.
We're going to be doing a final episode after this about just talking about our overall thoughts on the
Yes.
themes and kind of the overall structure of the film and the macro stuff.
Get a
But for
little
now,
deeper.
we're gonna get into like an overview and hopefully say some new things that you maybe haven't heard before. Maybe you have. We'll see. So
It's really hard to say something new about this 25-year-old movie.
Yeah, it's been analyzed to heck and back as well because it's just demanding to be dissected and examined. It's a very symbolism heavy, very metaphor laden type of second half, following a very cool first half. And so we pick up when Shinji's in the sandbox.
From when our last exciting episode left off.
Yes, Shinji's in the sandbox creating sand pyramids, and we get this awesome scene with Misato and Kaji making love in front of Shinji. And I like that there's a baseball scene playing in the background. It's really, really funny, actually, because like pitching and catching is like a metaphor for for doing the do. And so there's a baseball game on in the background, and it's very
Okay.
it's the height of summer. It feels very hot. There's a fan going on, and
Yep.
it's a
Things are getting hot inside too.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
And the fan is sort of strange because it actually kind of defies making sense in some of the shot compositions. Like the perspective of it doesn't really make sense no matter the lenses that it's used. It's kind of like always sticking itself in the frame. And I think that I think it's kind of funny because it's supposed to be how sex and stuff is kind of a relief from the hell of the world, like the heat from the outside and everything. That this moment is like, it's like a relief in the eternal summer because Ava takes place in an eternal summer, and so it's kind of
There's
describing her character using it as a way to relieve herself from trauma.
Which is actually really clever.
Yeah.
This is kind of off topic, but it's really clever that Evangelion is set in an eternal hot summer and it's always warm and there's always cicadas going, and like it contributes to the aesthetic sense of Evangelion just being like purgatory, basically.
Yes.
And now, so everyone's done with purgatory now, and they're all heading into the next stage of the afterlife, I guess, is the metaphor I'm making. Yeah.
And then we get some reused shots.
Also, what I was gonna mention is this parallels a moment in End of TV, right, where Masato's like, "No, I don't want to see. I don't want you to see me
it
like
does.
that."
It does. We get the other side of it, basically, where in End of TV, Misato is being like, "No, Shinji can't look into my head and see all this stuff," and
No, it's too gross. He's too young.
and there is that fan,
Even though-
and there is a lot of the same imagery. It's basically another clear overlap between End of TV and this movie.
Probably makes more sense to get into this when we're talking about End of TV, which we're also going to do. There's like 4 more episodes of Evangelion. Don't worry. If you thought we were going to stop talking about Evangelion, don't
We're gonna
worry.
milk this
There's like...
teat dry.
Thanks. There's just lots to talk about. There is a lot to talk about. We'll probably talk about, because some people think End of TV is like an alternate ending. I personally think it's the same ending.
Yeah, I mean,
I think different
think
interpretations of it.
it's a remake. This is a remake in the strictest.
It's the director's cut.
Yes,
Literally, I think it's labeled that way sometimes. Is the director's cut of episode 25 and 26. What he wanted to make but couldn't.
So then we see like Asuka and Rei inside this train car, and
So the train car basically is Shinji's mind. This is when it's where he always retreats to, because I guess it symbolizes, obviously rather straightforwardly, symbolizes his need to run away. It symbolizes his need to escape, and then he always ends up having like these train chats with other characters, and it even kind of represents who's important to him and who's not, because sometimes there's characters on the train, sometimes characters aren't on the train, they're just watching him on the train. There's that scene in episode 19 where Toji is sort of like watching him, but he's not on the actual train, but he can see him,
and
which I think is
and you know what's kind of interesting about this as well is that Asuka knows what Shinji's been up to, you know, like in the scene where he was over the hospital bed. And it actually parallels Dance Like You Want to Win, I believe, where Shia is asleep and he tries to go for a kiss, and then she's like, I know what you've been up to, and everything like that. And she was at the time, she wasn't, at least there, she was fishing. Yeah, she was just she was just like fishing. And in this situation, it's kind of like, is she fishing in the sense that she knows because Asuka is inside Shinji's head and can see what he's done, or does she know because she just was awake the whole time and whatnot and was faking being asleep? The point is that Ano is telling you
being asleep,
women will know what you're up to, don't try anything funny. So that's the message,
I guess.
They'll find a way.
Okay.
But I do think it's a clever parallel to then.
Well, a lot of what this last part of the movie is about is Asuka confronting Shinji. There's a lot of scenes about that, I'd say. So I think that's a major theme here.
There's a lot of cross-examination in general, I think, between all the characters, and that's what Instrumentality really is. You know, it feels like a police interrogation. In EOTV, it felt that way. In this movie, it feels that way at times, especially with the scene later with Gendo. But it's kind of like, what is the core of who you are, and are you a bad person? Like, fundamentally, are you deserving of happiness when you've done so many horrible things? And that's kind of like a big question.
It's also very retrospective
to answer.
Because we jump around through a lot of metaphorical scenes, but then we also have a lot of scenes of scenes from episode 15. So we see specific moments that Shinji is thinking back about and what's on his mind, and he's like, oh, remember that time I kissed Asuka? And so and that plays into their confrontation. It's really interesting. And I mean, the whole movie's like that, really. It's pay off the movie. I think we mentioned that in one of the parts already, but it is literally just pay off the movie. It's literally nothing but a sequence of payoffs for all these seeds that were planted in episodes 1 through 24.
Yes.
That have now come to bloom. They have bloomed and have borne fruit for us to munch on and discover that at the center there was a little kernel of truth we weren't expecting.
So kind of building off what you're saying with the episode 15 sequence and everything like that, I really like the camera work here. I think it actually does a really good job kind of feeling extremely live action and visceral. So it has a very, very wide lens, and this is kind of a sort of simulating cinemascope and everything like that, and sort of a much more live action feel because of how wide everything is, and it really feels extremely visceral and jumping between extreme highs and extreme low shots and everything like that. And so we're getting like a lot of extreme everything cinematically here, and it feels very jarring, but in a good way. It kind of works for the scene because this is like a huge confrontation where Asuka is just tearing Shinji down. It really is kind of like cinematically going for the throat and everything. So I think that's funny. The violin comes here as well, and it's actually has the harmonics. It sounds like two violins, but it's actually like, I think it's a chord being played on one violin. I think it's a violin solo from what I'm gathering, and it's just made to sound like two violins. So I think that works well with Shinji kind of wanting to be with Asuka, getting that comfort. I want to be with you forever, be with me, that type of thing, but getting rejected, and he is on his own. And so even musically, it's paralleling what's going on very, very well.
It's unnerving, and it shows how discordant his thinking is. How he's of two minds, really. And how they're not in concert either, him and Asuka.
And, Asuka calls him out, and she's just like, you're saying that you want to be with me forever, but you really can't if you don't even love yourself, because it's not really possible for you to focus on someone else's problems if you're so wrapped up in your own issues and everything like that. You've got your own trauma. You haven't dealt with your problems. You can't help me with my problems. You know, you're kind of just being like clingy and everything like that. And we get the coffee pot kind of boiling through the scene as well, as she's kind of her rage is mounting and everything. And she pushes him and he falls on the floor. And then we get that strangulation scene.
Yep.
And I think this ties...
Which I think is the most gruesome way you can murder someone, is by strangling them.
Yeah, it is very personal, and it is very...
yeah.
It's very... I think the two ways that I would like to die the least is either being strangled to death or stabbed to death. It's that kind of like nitty-gritty, you're in someone's personal bubble in a terrible kind of way.
Stabbing's quick though.
Yeah,
but like strangling is like it's like, I really want you dead. I am putting effort into killing you. It's not just there's no distance between you. You are like, I'm coming for you.
And he wants to destroy her because she's causing him pain and everything like that. In this moment, she's like saying truths that he doesn't want to hear, and kind of being sort of honest in a way that's too honest. And so he lashes out and he's like, I'd rather just not hear it. And so I'm going to destroy your vocal cords as well. Like the thing that you use to speak, because I don't want you to talk anymore. And I think that's what it has to do again with like choking and going for someone's throat. It's like, I hate what you're saying. Your words, they're making me hurt. And then, this ties into Kaji and the watermelon patch scene, where Kaji and Shinji talk about pain and everything like that, and how Shinji's most afraid of pain. And it also ties into the end of this film in the final scene, because like the final scene is where Shinji strangles her for seemingly no reason. Feels like if you cut between this scene and that scene, it would work seamlessly, emotionally speaking. So I think it's like a continuation of the emotions happening here. And this has to do overall with themes of Eva and how a lot of Japan can't connect with people like romantically. There's problems with romance.
I read
and
an
birth
article.
Rates and,
I read an article once about, it was from like a maiden, basically, like I think she was a sex therapist, and how like the birth rate is so low, and she's trying to console men to like have sex with women, and they just don't want to do it. It was a very odd article to read. I'm not sure how authentic it was, but it was a thing I found at one point in my life.
It's pretty true though, that we know objectively speaking that there is a problem with relationships and romance and intimacy, and a lot of their media reflects that too. You have stuff like Wolf Children by Mamoru Hosoda, who's trying to almost place motherhood, the importance of motherhood at the forefront, because it kind of has to make families appealing. Like a lot of Japanese media are trying to be like, having a family is a good thing, you should do it. But
we don't want immigrants, please have children.
And that kind of has to do, Eva is largely about the relationship between men and women, and how it really hurts getting close to people, and the closer you get to someone, the more that they can abuse your feelings for them and hurt you even more than if they were just like total strangers and everything. Love is dangerous, but it's worth it. It's a big part of what Ava's about. And we get cuts between this to like the strangulation of Naoko and Evangelion 1, and
strangling is a recurring theme in Evangelion, seemingly, and interestingly.
And it's being cut from earlier parts of the show where it's like, remember the choking?
Remember when this strangulation happened? Remember when this strangulation happened? Well, it's happening again.
Yeah. And now we've kind of gone to Crazy Town, because we're fully in the Komm, süsser Todd sequence. And
well, it's just always represented, because the Naoka Ray scene is really the one I always think of, where it's like the most brutal, like like, dude, she just said you were like old. You are kind of old. Like, calm down. Like, calm down,
but it hurt
please.
her feelings. And
it hurt her feelings. I have to murder a child and then murder myself. It's the only solution.
And Toji,
is it Naoka or Naoko? By the way,
I think it's Naoko with an O.
Okay,
but Shinji, he had his feelings hurt by Toji's Eva unit, and so that's why he strangled.
I don't know if that analogy works quite as well, but
no, it doesn't. I'm just kind of making fun of the fact that they cut that. It seemed like a stretch at the time, even in the movie. It's like, I don't know about this one.
Well, it's to show. Well, what that is it's to show the brutality. It's not about Shinji's Eva unit strangling Toji's Eva unit. It's about the fact that Shinji was forced to do that by his father. That's what that moment represents. It's the brutality of Gendo.
It's like emotional.
And how he's enforcing that on Shinji.
Yeah, an emotional extreme. Because that was a very powerful moment at the time for different reasons, but yeah.
And Gendo Ibuchi watched it and went, huh. He was really intrigued.
I wonder if I can include this in every series I make.
Multiple times. In case anyone's wondering what we're talking about. Gendo Ibuchi, every show he's ever worked on, has had women being strangled to death.
Most of everyone. I think there might be one or two that don't, but...
I'm not sure about that.
Maybe Madoka doesn't? I don't know if... Wait, does it? I'm thinking.
Maybe not Madoka, you're right.
Madoka's sure made to be as accessible to everyone as possible.
Madoka has other things about brutality against women, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. That's true. And then we get a bunch of child drawings, which I think is actually really interesting because in psychology, child drawings are often examined to see if there's like abuse in a domestic situation. Like if a kid starts drawing some really effed up things, you can be like, oh well, maybe this is indicative of something worse happening. And they're
pretty effed up child drawings, so these drawings have things like dead fish and dead dogs and a child stabbing a parent. It looks like it's very grotesque, and I've heard theories that these are supposed to be Asuka's drawings or something like that, and I'm just like, I don't know about that one. That's a reach.
But I think it's mainly just to show that childhood has such an important and impactful relationship to how we treat each other in adulthood.
Maybe calling back to the fact that episode 25, 26 have so many pencil drawings in them too. I always thought that was kind of what he was going for a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know how that connects, but that's always the vibe I got.
Well, in our early childhood and Jungian psychology and Freudian psychology, are like childhood has a lot to do with how we sort of relate to other adults in adulthood. And so maybe he's tying that in with the motifs from episode 25 and 26, where you have those, marker drawings and such. But
their psychological character studies is really what they are. So that's what this kind of is.
Yeah.
Except spelled out a bit more.
And you have like kid drawings, but also drawings that look like they're done from adults in here too. It is like the crayon stuff, but then you have that kind of like Copic marker, I believe is what it's called, like illustrations that feel a lot more sophisticated, and probably from the staff. And so maybe that's maybe some of it is like, oh, let's get some of the staff to draw some, and then we'll have some kids draw some weird messed up things too.
Well, probably the staff drew all of them. I don't know if they had children come in and draw anything. Maybe they did. Maybe.
They're like, hey,
some of them are like life drawings.
Draw a bloody tornado, and then they're like, yeah, this looks effed up.
This looks like a child drew it. Thank you, Mr. Otto. I'm just kidding. Otto's obviously good at art.
He is actually really good at art. And then
he's an animation director. I hope he knows how to draw.
And then we get the Komm, süsser Todd sequence in full.
Yes. Then we have this awesome sequence. This is my favorite sequence in the whole movie, probably, is the Komm, süsser Todd sequence. I want to talk a bit about the song. is the first thing I want to really talk
Yeah,
about.
go
This.
for it.
So this is Komm süsser Tod. I don't know how to say it. It's German for Come Sweet Death. It's sung by Ariane. I had her last name, Schweikert or something.
Ariana
something like
Grande.
that. Her name is not Ariana Grande. It's Ariane, first off. But yeah, she's a British singer. English. I think she's English. I think she's South African English or something like that. And yeah, so I love this song. I've listened to the song 1,000 times. There is so much going on in it.
Even if you've never seen Ava, you probably know about this song. It's actually just a meme in general.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. It's a really beautiful song, I think. And it really gives this sort of serene feeling of hopeless death while also making you feel really good about it. That's how I would describe this song.
Yeah, the song is like in a major key and it sounds very bouncy and everything, but the lyrics are really, really, downtrodden and depressing.
Yeah. And the tone of it is very low though, even though it's a major key. It's very there's an undercurrent. It's very Carpenter's-esque, I think.
Yeah, people have compared it to like Hey Jude and stuff from the Beatles.
Yeah, Hey Jude's the Beatles. Yeah. I think more the Carpenters. I think more Carpenters than Beatles, but it does sound a fair bit like Hey Jude in terms of tone, I guess. But that's the same-ish era. Carpenters are like mid-70s. Beatles are late 60s, so same movement, really. Hippie, peace and love movement.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And of course, it's all juxtaposed with these awful satanic images of
everyone turning into crosses and orgasms.
Yes, everyone's turning into crosses, and the angels are all pleasuring themselves with spears, and
yeah.
And then meanwhile, in between all this, we're just still cutting back to the freaking bridge crew talking about, oh my god, the zeitgeist manifest has finally passed the threshold. And like every 5 minutes, we have to cut back to these sequences just to remind us that they're there. And it is actually kind of effective in the long run, but it's really funny to cut from these god angel aliens sticking spears into themselves and then cut to a boardroom, basically.
Yeah, but then we get that awesome scene where the Rays are kind of turning into the people that the bridge crew loves the most. And so, you have Maya who sees Ritsuko, and then it turns out to be just Ray in disguise, and then she blows them up and harvests their souls for instrumentality. Yep. So which is how everyone presumably transforms into these crosses and everything. So she's going across the whole world and manifesting.
Lawrence Keel's beloved childhood friend appears before him. I don't know.
Yeah.
So we got Fuyutsuki, we got Yui for Fuyutsuki, we got Masato for Makoto, we got and then Shigeru doesn't love anybody, I guess, so he just sees like 100 rays, or he has some very, very messed up fantasies.
Yes, it's one or the other. I like to think that Aoba is our ace king, that he's our aromantic representation. That's
okay, sure. It's gonna show up on a wiki in like a week or something. Like Shigeru Aoba is asexual, as said by GoatJesus in his podcast.
Oh yeah. They listen. The wiki is just hanging on every word that we say.
That you say, Ava Geeks. It is theorized that Shigeru Aoba is asexual.
But what I love about these is that these are all unrequited loves. So we see that everybody is in love with someone
dead, I think.
who doesn't love them or doesn't know that they love them. And they're all dead. Yeah. And so there's like a tragedy to it. It's kind of like human condition in a way to, I guess, that these people are very unfulfilled romantic. Nobody in Ava is fulfilled romantically. You're either the person you love is dead, or they.
Is there a single married person in the entirety of Evangelion? I guess Asuka's parents, her stepmom and her dad, maybe.
This is the This show is the
It's the biggest stretch.
this show
Two characters we never see that we only hear off screen.
I think the show just really resonates with a lot of people who are struggling either romantically or are very young, who they haven't had any romantic relationships, and so it does feel like
I'm
distant.
just curious, is there actually a married couple in this show at any point?
Yeah, like there's a marriage that Misato goes to with Kaji.
Oh yeah.
But we don't even really
goes to
know
a
who
wedding,
they are.
But we don't know who's getting married.
Yeah.
Maybe
This speaks to the losers of
Lawrence
the
Keane has a
world,
wife?
not the Giga Chat alphas who already have people. So,
Yeah, that's what defines someone. Are you in a committed relationship?
I'm afraid you're not a Giga
Sorry.
Chat alpha then.
Oh, I guess you're not a Giga Chat Alpha. I guess you're not fulfilled. You're not in a relationship. Sorry.
And and we see as well that Lawrence Keel was a cyborg who was being held together with technology and everything like that. Like he was somebody
he gets
who's like
popped and
on death's door and clearly was on death's door or struggling to stay alive.
Yeah.
And that's why he was seeking.
it tells you a lot about him, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. In like one image, you're like, oh, okay, I can infer like all of his motivation. And
yeah, like, oh, he didn't want to die, so he's been extending his life with like robot parts. It's like there's a lot there just from this one sequence.
It's very simple, and I think a lot of people when they're first watching it pass over it. Like they see it and they're like, what? And then they just kind of don't really engage with it.
Weird bad guy.
But yeah,
I also like that he says the motto of Nerve for some reason. I don't know why this is Nerve's motto and he says it, but he says all is right with the world. I think is that dub only, or is it in the sub too, where he says the actual?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, because it's definitely from the End of Evangelion dub that Amanda Lee did, and she wrote what she wanted to, and I think it's good, but she did write what she wanted to.
Oh,
to be fair,
I mean, wasn't it Amanda Lee's commentary as well, where they theorized that Lawrence Keel was like Abel or Cain from Cain and Abel, like
did they actually? That's insane.
Doomed to walk forever upon the earth or whatever, being immortal. It was either
whichever one
it was either
Cain. It'd be Cain. Cain killed Abel.
Yeah, Cain, exactly. And so there was a theory from someone who was on staff. It was either Matt Greenfield or Amanda Lee. I can't remember.
No, I think it was Taliesin Jaffe. That sounds like something Taliesin Jaffe would say.
Taliesin Jaffe, yes. I think it was
who did not work on End of Ava. I don't know why he's on that DVD commentary, but it's fine.
They're
Whatever.
like,
it's fine.
They're like, oh, it's Cain from Cain and Abel. But I'm sitting here going like, why is an immortal person being held together with robot parts if they're like immortal? Like, why was he seeking immortality if he's already immortal? So that doesn't make any sense. But
maybe he isn't.
I just don't think he's Cain.
It's like, oh my god, I only had 60 or how long has it been since biblical times? I only had like 5,000 years to live. Well, more than that, actually. 7,000. I only had 7,000 years to live. Oh my god, I got 3 days left. It was only for 7,565 days or years, and that's it. To the day.
It's just kind of a silly interpretation. I think it's funny, but it's definitely not the reading I would have gone for, which I think is. I just wanted to bring it up.
I don't know.
It is something that I remember hearing around in the Ava community for a little bit. Yeah.
There's a lot of this movie has inspired a lot of silly theories. It has. Some of them are fun,
including some of ours.
I'm not going to take away anyone's fun. I'm not going to rain on anyone's parade, but there's a lot of silly theories.
And then we kind of get the Gendo sequence after this, and
is that next?
Yes, it is next. And
this is.
Then I want to talk about Everything You Ever Dreamed, which was going to originally be. The song.
Yeah.
But first,
I don't know if there's much to say about that, but
first I want to talk about Gendo.
Gendo Ikari.
Yes, and so he has a responsibility as a father that he's been avoiding, much like Shinji is avoiding. Or has been avoided in respect to piloting Ava. And so we have that parallel between Gendo and Shinji. And Gendo is like, yes, I was always afraid of being a dad for him and getting close to him, which is another kind of love besides a romantic love that is pushing people apart.
Unrequited romantic love. Yeah. He's visited by 3 ghosts.
Yes.
There's a lot of
past, present,
triptychs.
and future.
trios going on here. Yeah, a little bit. I don't know about past, present, and future, but yeah, there's a lot of triptychs going on here. So there's the three Reis. There's Yui, Kaoru, and Rei.
Yes.
They're kind of a triptych. I don't know what they represent. I guess we can talk about it. The three Reis.
Well, I think that they are all people, that represent love in some kind of way.
Unconditional love.
Yeah, like Rei was sort of loved Gendo as a type of daughter and everything like that.
They're almost like buddies.
Yeah,
really. Gendo and Rei are almost kind of buddies.
And
they're not really like
Yui
father and
loved
daughter.
him. She loved him romantically, and then Kaoru is like this manifestation of love in general. So where he's almost like the spirit of love, because he says so later in the movie. But he's being interrogated, and this is very much like a police interrogation, which I think is really cool. So we see a shot of Gendo lying on the floor, and characters are added, each making a point. Yui's added and she makes a point, and then Kaoru's added, he makes a point, Rei's added and she makes a point, and we're repeating that shot over and over and adding to it, and it kind of shows like the cyclical nature of him and kind of his repetition and behavior, and he's prone to cycles just like Shinji is. It humanizes him in a very, very concise way and makes sense, I think, with everything that we've seen from Gendo up to this point. But you're meant to sort of assume that Gendo's just this asshole who really doesn't have much going on. But he is just as afraid as Shinji is, and just as unable to commit. I like that the spotlight overhead as well. It kind of reminds me of like a theater projector. Which we see theater projectors later in the live action sequence and such. And so I think that it highlights that Gendo is almost like this doesn't need to be the case with him. He is like this because it's very constructed. It's fictional. It's a very false way of approaching the world, where it's like, oh, I'm not going to be the father to Shinji because I'm just afraid of that, of the consequences of that. And it's very constructed in his mind, but
well, I think the spotlight is also supposed to be that he's being revealed, because this is when his veneer is kind of wiped away.
That's true. Of
being this domineering character. He's I
really appreciate it, because we don't need 10 minutes to explain Gendo. We get pretty much everything about him in 50 seconds. Very
succinct, yes. So... whatever the time is.
And
everything that you might find out later in another medium is very succinctly explained in a very quick, effective, short scene here. I don't know how it could be done any better, really.
I
also think it's interesting that that Yui, Kaoru, and Rei are speaking as one. So it's not like we're jumping between three different perspectives. They're really speaking in the same cadence and tone and saying, and following up on each other's ideas. It's not the idea that like, oh, this character who represented this is jumping in, and this character who represented this is jumping in. They're all speaking in one uniform.
It's kind of interesting. It just maybe occurred to me, and this might be a little bit of a reach, but you have like Kaoru, who's Adam, Rei, who is Lilith, and maybe Yui is Eve. So it's kind of funny.
Maybe.
But that's a little fun thing to throw in there.
It definitely is supposed to represent the primogeniture of like mankind.
Yeah.
The primordial man, the primordial woman, Adam and Eve. It's definitely supposed to be that sort of thing going on, I think.
Yeah.
Nice deep analysis there. That thing.
I like Gendo. I think he's
it
cool.
makes sense what I'm saying. Yes, this makes Gendo really interesting to me. I think Gendo would be a really boring character without this scene.
Yes.
But I think this sort of reveals how his indifference towards Shinji was never rooted in disappointment or in like, oh, Shinji's just not enough of a man. It was rooted in Gendo's own inadequacies and his own fears and his own inability to connect with other people.
Which parallels Shinji really, really well.
Which parallels Shinji pretty well.
Gendo gives insight into what Shinji could become if he went down the same path he's been doing. And
different stages of the same person, really.
it is a warning.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Gendo.
oh, go on.
Gendo is also destroyed by the thing he created because he was consumed by his own inability to let things go, because he was nothing without Yui. He couldn't go on, and we see that in episode 21 pretty distinctly and pretty clearly with the we talked about it at the time, but like the scene with his shadow looks like he's bearing a cross, and it makes him look kind of almost heroic and like a man who's been put upon, but he's really created this whole situation for himself. He's really the one who's refused to let go of Yui, and he's hurting all these other people in his life in order to achieve that end. And in the end, he is consumed by that. So he's destroyed by the Evangelion unit he helped create.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of fun because it's sort of showing Eva Unit 1. It doesn't really make sense why Eva Unit 1's here, but it doesn't really make sense why anybody's here or manifesting.
Everything here is representational. But I don't think there's any rhyme or reason to any of it. Yeah,
exactly. It's very representational, but Unit 1 is sort of half in armor. It's very like raw and kind of
that's true.
It shows like the constructedness of it and how maybe he created this thing. It kind of gets you thinking about like how he tried to control it but couldn't, and it's breaking free from that armor maybe. Kind
of almost what I was getting at is that I think a lot of the reason the characters are all talking in unison is they're kind of reflections of the character they're talking to.
Yeah, that's true.
So and the Evangelion unit is laid bare too. All the armor has been taken away. It's like it's in its ugliest form.
Yeah, it is. So do you think that when Gendo is devoured by Eva Unit 1 that he joins Yui or not? Because I know that there's fan speculation that when he's eaten by it, he joins Yui inside the unit, or maybe not. Maybe he's just killed.
That's my deep analysis.
I definitely have always interpreted it as he's not joining Instrumentality, and one thing that Seele kind of promised, or they were threatening earlier in the movie, is like death is all that we're gonna give you and everything. Death is all you'll have.
Yeah, I don't know if that matters too much, but
no, but it doesn't really matter too much. But the fate of Gendo is kind of left up to interpretation. I don't think he joins Instrumentality. We don't really see him in Instrumentality. And I know in episode 25 and 26, maybe that's more of a representation from Shinji's own mind and everything like that. So, but we're getting maybe this is too literal, but I it's kind of fun to think about anyway.
It is. I think the main thing is that he looked for Yui everywhere, and in the end, he is reunited with Yui. Because Eva Unit 1 is Yui. So
yeah, I think there's an irony to it, right? Yeah, there's definitely
an irony to it.
To being eaten by Eva Unit 1. And then we get 3 rays, like the imagery of
then the 3 rays show up. They don't talk to them. They show up after that, and we see them lined up.
Yeah, and
the goddess triptychs are obviously a big part of mythology. You have the Fates, you have the Furies, you have the Norns, you have the lots of
three goddesses, exactly. Please. And Ray 2 picks up Gendo's glasses, which, if I'm not mistaken, are they the same glasses from earlier that he had, or are they the new glasses that he's been wearing, the kind of more oval ones?
Clear.
I can't really remember, but
did his glasses change?
Yeah,
is he wearing different glasses before, and then he gets a new pair, and they're like snazzier?
Yeah, he has.
Can you imagine Gendo going glasses shopping?
He goes to the 7-Eleven and just like
he just gets the cheapo ones. He's like, Soka.
Yeah, this is good enough for me. So I have the scene up right now, and is it his new pair of glasses that he has, or is it the old one?
It's probably the new one.
Yeah, I think it's the new pair that he has. Like, the more rounded, bespectacled ones.
I think the only reason.
Yeah.
We mentioned this before. This was a stupid joke we made up. But Ray was just interested in him because of the glasses. She just found that dangerous pair and was like, a man who owns a pair of glasses like this, I must discover his secrets.
And now she picks up this new pair and is just like, what mysteries can I uncover now?
Over now.
So
Yeah.
Ray 2 picks up Gendo's new pair of glasses. Ray 3 has she's making a hand gesture like she's holding a pair of glasses, but isn't actually holding anything. There's no glasses there. Which I think
she vaporized them.
Well, she broke them before at the beginning of the movie. So, and then Ray 1 is kind of standing there just kind of looking. And I think maybe this is supposed to be about how Ray currently doesn't need Gendo, but past Ray will always hold him in her heart or something like that. Like maybe there's some fondness there.
Not an unfitting idea.
And so
I think
it's like maybe it's like Ray's way of valuing how he sort of intentionally or not helped her grow into her own person. So
maybe very possible.
Yeah.
I think it's also the fact that we have so many different Rays. We have like Quantum Ray, we have Ray 1, Ray 2, Ray 3, we have like so many different Rays is also just show how there's so many different sides to like a woman, which is kind of old fashioned, but like it's meant to showcase that there are many different faces to a person, even if they appear to just be a simple image, because she's really very image driven.
That's true.
Yeah.
So then we come back to more montages of instrumentality, and I do want to quickly talk about like Everything You've Ever Dreamed, which is an alternate song that they would have had in place of Komm, süsser, and I think that it talks too much from the point of view of like Asuka and Shinji's dynamic very, very specifically, whereas Komm, süsser speaks more generally to people and kind of depression conceptually. Like Everything You Ever Dreamed has like verses about finding love of a girl and everything. It's very specifically seems like Shinji's experience, but I do like that they went with Komm, süsser, and we get some really interesting sound mixing going on with Komm, süsser, where you'll have the stereo really emphasized, where it'll have that and it kind of jumps back and forth in the left and right ear and everything. And it highlights kind of the contrast between all this erotic imagery and death, and pleasure and pain, and kind of like how mental illness, even when you're experiencing good moments, it's always kind of undermined by you having these other problems. And so I think that there's there's a lot of duality going on, and a lot of it's like, oh, even in happy moments, my depression still threatens to eclipse, and it's a tug of war. And in general, I feel like there's a lot of tug of war kind of stuff going on with the song and the sequence and all the imagery going on there. It's great. Do you have anything else you want to say about Komm, süsser before we move on?
No, not really. I mean, I already said everything about that. Everything You Ever Dreamed, I'm glad they didn't use it because it's a little too low key, I think. I don't think it's dramatic enough, but it's a really beautiful song.
It is. It's a great song. Yeah.
I always thought it represented Shinji and Kaoru more than anything, but that doesn't
maybe
really
it
make
does.
sense.
The
tone of it.
It very much feels like a 1v1 kind of relationship dynamic, though, for sure. Yeah. Whatever it is.
Yeah. Whatever it is. Yeah. It's a beautiful song.
Speaking of queerness, the next thing that we see is Shinji. He goes into instrumentality type of deal, and like physically, like literally sees all these rays that are gathering all these souls and everything like that, and he says Ayanami Ray, and then he sees Ray but with his face plastered on all these Ray clones, and so Shinji's got some boobies, and I did wind up reading some.
You've been obsessed with this shot for a very long time. You'd be like, oh my god. I remember you found this like 10 years ago or something. You're like, oh my god, there's a shot in the movie where Shinji has boobs. And you just would not stop talking about it for like 20 minutes.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting because it speaks to the queerness of identity, not just in sexuality, but in gender identity and performance and everything like that. And so, he himself has always been kind of struggling with being seen as like feminine and whatnot, where Toji would criticize him, for example, for cleaning or cooking. And he kind of takes a lot of feminine roles and everything like that. And so maybe there's some subtext going on that he's not just confused about his sexuality, but also maybe his gender and everything. I think that really...
Maybe Shinji just can't make up his mind about anything. Maybe that's what's
he is completely non-committal and wish-washy about everything. Which I personally like wish-washy characters, as long as they're handled well, and I think Shinji's really handled well, because it's very much a story about adolescence, and when you are adolescent, you're very wish-washy. Like, I remember being like, oh, I hope I never have facial hair, that would be so gross or whatever, and then I'd be like, actually facial hair is really cool and it's very manly and you should have it, and then I'd be like, no, I have to cut it all off, I can't you know, when you're a kid, you're not sure if you want to grow up, but also you kind of do, but you kind of don't, and so there's a lot of back and forth with that.
I also find it interesting that, okay, so he makes that face again, right? I think it's from 23, where he makes that like a face where he's like kind of grinning like madly because he's so disturbed. I think that's from 23.
Maybe it was the director's cut though for 23. I'm thinking it might have been the director's cut, but
it might have been. It doesn't matter. Anyway, so it's a recurring face of horror, which I think is a really funny face, but also very disturbing. Speaking of not being decisive, it was the worst thing I've ever seen, but I really liked it. Anyway, so like he gets freaked out anytime there's like this concept of multiple rays brought up, and I don't know if this is like he's getting like PTSD or like triggered because he was so traumatized by watching Ritsuko like murder a whole fish tank full of 100 rays, or what. But yeah, so that's going on.
Yeah, he might be afraid of just like the concept of death that they represent in his mind. So, you know, people dying and everything like that, because he sees them as individuals, whereas maybe they're not, but, you know, he kind of feels that way. Go on.
To be fair, if you did go into like a room and someone pushed a button and then you just watched a bunch of bodies like burst apart
people who
and, like,
you know
float away,
like
of someone you know, one person you know cloned 100 times, you'd be like, oh my god, you would be pretty horrified.
Yeah. And then we get this very, very intimate kind of simulation of instrumentality, which I think is really, really cool. So we get the experience of instrumentality, but more from an audience point of view. It's kind of like an avant-garde kind of technique where we have all these epileptic seizure-like images flashing on the screen on and off, and lots of lines, and there are things from previous episodes. There are merchandise. There's a Misato doll in here, so you got a little bit of meta.
Really?
Yeah, you can pause and see like a doll of Misato at one point. Train cars, like whirring by, traffic, these voices that are saying condescending to you and saying mean stuff.
Specifically women's voices, I think.
Yeah, women's voices very, very specifically. And so
here's my thing. I feel like this whole movie is just like an autobiographical journal entry from Anno talking about how much trouble he has approaching women to ask them for dates. I think that's a big part of this movie.
Yeah,
weirdly.
It is.
So then by contrast is the rebuild about how happy he is now that he's married.
I would say so, but I prefer a more miserable Anno than a happy Anno.
Yeah, I know. Art is suffering.
I think he makes more interesting art as a tortured artist. So, but
that's so common. It's such a like stereotype.
I know. It is.
Like, oh, you're happy now. Your art sucks. I don't even know if that's true. I don't think that's true, but
I think a lot of the
good art comes from contrast. It comes from struggling. It doesn't necessarily come from failing, but it comes from struggling. When you have something you want to do, when you have a need for something. I think that's where good art comes from. That's my opinion.
Yes, I agree. I think that you need some kind of conflict in your life to be dealing with in order to capture a story, because story is built on the foundation of conflict. And so one thing, you know, that maybe Rebuild doesn't do as super well is like everyone's kind of stepping aside and creating the least amount of conflict for Shinji in order for him to achieve happiness, whereas like everyone here is at his throat. And I think that's much more more dramatic. It's much more interesting to me.
It also makes it really relatable, not to really talk about the rebuild, but it makes it really relatable that you do have this sort of core relatable thing that you're alone and it's hard to approach people and it's hard to trust that people are always going to be there. That's very universal. I think everyone goes through that.
I think stories are best made when they're speaking to people who are struggling, as opposed to maybe talking about how I'm not struggling anymore. It kind of feels a little
well, I mean, I don't even suppose struggle, but just having something relatable that people can look at and go like, yeah, I can relate to that. I've experienced that.
Yeah.
And showing all the elements of that, because this isn't End of Eva and Evangelion in general is not just a purely depressing movie or story about failure. There's lots of good things that happen in it too, and the ending, which we'll get to in like 5 minutes, is really hopeful too. I think you can have a really hopeful, optimistic interpretation of it.
Oh, for sure. I think that it's becoming more and more common of a reading to read it as a deceptively happy ending. And I love media that does that, by the way, where you have an ending that's like seemingly bad or seemingly good, and it turns out that there's maybe more to it than that. And I think this is definitely one of those situations.
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the aesthetics and the imagery that he's using. So like you're horrified by this cosmic being rising up into space and these evil Evangelion units that are like vultures tearing someone apart. Like you have all these disgusting images, but when you actually break the plot down, it's like, oh, it's kind of a hopeful story. It's a hopeful story that you can get through whatever's stopping you, and you can find purpose and meaning when you choose to do that, when you decide to do that for yourself. Which is a bit draconian, but it's still a hopeful message.
It gives people, I think, agency in order to at least begin to see that they can be happy, which is a big thing. It's like everyone has the possibility to be happy. And knowing that alone is like a beacon in the darkness, that it's like, I'm not going to be depressed forever, or I don't have to be. Like I can get through this. And that's kind of what it's
I think there's
pushing you
a question too of making things easier for yourself versus working harder. I think there's also something to be said for that, I think Evangelion is much more in that second column, where it's like you gotta work harder instead of making things easier on yourself. But
Ava asks you, can you be happy when there's no one to help you, essentially? And that's a big thing, is that there's not going to be,
which we discussed before,
everyone there to sort of carry your weight for you. And so it's like you do have to work harder for that. And we're getting to the broader themes and such like that. So let's just kind of jump back into the meat of the movie. But there was a cut live action sequence that happened here at this part of the movie that we're at.
It was long too, wasn't it?
After the tunnel of evil ex-girlfriends. It was long. Yeah. It was around 9 minutes or so, if I'm remembering correctly, and it was with Asuka's and Misato's voice actresses in live action playing Asuka and Misato, which is funny. And so they're working at a menial job and everything like that, and Asuka's like doing pushing pencils and papers around and stuff like that in an office and everything. And it's a really kind of bizarre sequence, and I think it's supposed to be equivalent to in episode 25 and 26, episode 26 specifically, when we have that sequence with Shinji at the school. And in this situation, it's showing a world without Shinji. And so Asuka and Misato are kind of, they're chill and they're having a good time. And they're like, Shinji and Asuka's dating Toji, I think, in this sequence.
Okay, yeah.
And it is like a kind of strange
fantasy sequence.
Yeah, it is a strange sort of fantasy like sequence, and it was cut out of the movie and replaced with a montage of Tokyo 3 as live action. I think it was replaced. I don't think this was in the movie necessarily originally. And so End of Eva is kind of like the version that we're watching is kind of a director's cut of the director's cut.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And
Okay.
he's got footage
movie.
of the screening of Death and Rebirth here instead in the version that we have.
Right.
And he filmed the audience kind of waiting for Death and Rebirth, and little did they know that they were going to be watching a bad recap movie, you know.
Which has a very good dub for some reason.
It does have a good dub. And we get those live action shots and everything, and it's really, you said this before, but I think it's true that it kind of helps us to think about our own lives in respect to intersecting with the themes in the story of Eva.
Yeah, it's a live action. I think the main point of the live action sequences is to act as a mirror to reflect on you and say, here, this is your life. This isn't just a fantasy story. It's supposed to reflect what's going on with you a little bit. At least that's his effort to do that. And I think it's much more autobiographical to a large extent than it is that. But it is also that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's pointing the camera directly at us, you know, the viewers and stuff. But it's also here to...
Is it true? Is it true that section where it's panning over the audience was like he spliced in when it was airing or when it was the initial run?
No, it wasn't during the initial run. I think it was taken during Death and Rebirth.
Was it every time? Like if I went to sit down and watch the movie and it was like the third screening, would that section always be like...
Oh,
that's not possible, right?
I don't think that would be. Yeah, I don't know if that would be possible.
I feel like I remember hearing. Yeah. I think when we initially watched it, you told me that.
There are a lot of rumors about, you know, Ava. We probably said some BS about things, but I try to at least be consistent with the research and everything, and not cite anything that at least that I know is nonsense.
It's a fun idea.
Yeah,
it's a fun idea to sit down and watch a movie, and then at one point it just like
you see yourself,
shows you,
yeah.
You see yourself. Yeah, it's kind of a cool idea.
They can do it at baseball games, so maybe they can do it, but I don't know.
Maybe they can.
With digital technology.
I'm thinking about how film projectors work is the main thing. Like that's
with a film strip, no, but if it was like a digital file, then potentially.
Yeah. It's just like Anno's just in the front, like filming everybody, and then like running to the back and splicing it into like the thing before they get to that part.
Well,
he's like,
it could have been possible if it was on two reels, right? Where you have the death and rebirth halves and everything like that, right? So you'd have the air and then the
maybe that's why there's a credits in the intermission. Yeah. It's like, guys, go get your popcorn. Well, Mr. Anno.
Well, Mr. Anno works on the cutting room floor. Yeah. There's another purpose that I think that this has in the movie, where to Shinji, this live action is fake and it is false, and so it's kind of like from his point of view as a fictional character, all this is escaping into a world where there is no conflict, and that's especially true of that live action sequence that was cut between Asuka and Misato, because he was observing a world where there was no him and there was no Ava and there was no conflict, and it was just a average everyday existence. And so in a way that is like a fantasy, and Shinji hates himself and wishes that he would disappear, and so this is kind of like granting him a version of reality where he is gone. Either way, it's been cut from the film. But I think it does point to maybe some intentionality there. And we have these scenes of the three voice actresses of Evangelion. I think it's like Misato, Rei's, and Asuka's voice actresses.
Yeah, Koto no Mitsuishi, Mayumi Hayashibara, and I don't remember her name.
And they're standing in crowds of people who are walking, and they're dressed in cosplay and dressed out of cosplay and everything. And there is a speech that conversation that Rei and Shinji are having that is very reminiscent of episode 25 and 26, where they are discussing abstract concepts of what is a dream, what is reality, are we in a fantasy right now, where does the fantasy begin and end? And that conversation is mixed really interestingly, where we hear Shinji really close and next to us, with Rei speaking on the other side of the room, and then it's swapped at the end of the conversation where we're really close to Rei and Shinji's on the other side of the room. And so there is this sense of point of views shifting, and Shinji kind of coming over to the other side in a type of way, and realizing that maybe he's making some mistakes about reality and existence. And we cut after that to the famous Anno hate mail sequence, where there is a series of emails and letters and graffiti on Studio Gainax of people who hated Evangelion and Death and Rebirth, but also and not a lot of people cite this, but there's a lot of fan mail in here too. It is not just hate, and a lot of people use this as a way to say that Anno is trying to give people the middle finger with this film, and that it's a very negative type of movie. But
it's so weird.
It's not true. This is just rumor. It's 100% fake. I've actually gone through the work of translating some of them myself just to see, and it actually is the case that there is fan mail here. There is love just as much as hate, and it's again that duality that we've been seeing throughout the whole movie. And now positivity is going to win out in the end, and love is going to win.
Truthfully, though,
so
can you imagine someone making an expensive movie like this just to get back at people who sent them hate mail? Like, hey guys, I directed an hour and a 90-minute movie or 70-minute movie or whatever it is, just to get back at you. And here's what you said. Still think that you like. I don't even know what. Is he like bragging? Is he like, look how good this movie is? Look how bad this movie is. I could have made it so much worse for you. It's really funny.
Well, I think it's like his emotional disposition, where maybe he's feeling depressed about Eva or feeling like elated about it. And I know for me personally, a lot of hate always sticks with me more. But I don't want to. I don't want to be somebody who's like defined by it, who will ruin a story over it. And I don't think anyone is. If they've worked hard on something, they're not going to make something that's like an FU to everyone just because they get hate from it.
That's what I'm saying, is like the amount of effort that goes into making a film and how many people are involved. It's just like, it's not just Anno's work on his own, for one thing. So even if he was inspired, or even if he was pushed into making decisions by the fan reaction, it's like, you don't make a movie like this just for that. You don't make a movie just to like confound people or just to piss them off.
Yeah.
Like, really.
I think it's funny as well that he accidentally, I think, doxes some people here.
Oh, he left the address.
Yeah, he left the name Toshiki Unuyama at Hajime City, and then his email, and, his email address, tueyama at opticameoview.co.jp.
Okay. Are you doxing him now, too?
I'm redoxing this Toshiki Yama.
This letter from 25 to 30 years ago.
I'm just saying, Toshiki, if you're out there and you're listening, I think Anno's working at Kara now. If you wanna get some lawyers, you wanna contact Anno-san and maybe get your name out of the movie, and maybe get some of that green on the side too.
I don't know if lawsuits like that happen in Japan.
No, probably not. They're probably much more lax about this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So Rei's neck splits open. It's the end of Instrumentality. At this point, Shinji's already decided to end it, but then we get to see kind of the thought process of that in the next scene. And Shinji wakes up much similar to how he wakes up in the hospital rooms. Unfamiliar ceiling and everything like that. And
unfamiliar
Rei
sky
and him are joined together as one individual, and they separate after Shinji and her talk about pain and the concept of pain. And she's like, are you okay with experiencing pain again because of others?
Isn't this the conversation with Yui?
No. Rei and Shinji have this conversation in the Sea of LCL.
Okay.
And Shinji goes, yes, I'm okay with experiencing pain again. A lot of people, again, misinterpret this scene because of weird translations. But she's asking if he's okay with being an individual again and experiencing pain from the fact that other people are individuals, and so they can hate him or love him, because instrumentality is kind of supposed to be avoiding all that, because if you're all one person, then there's no other who's there to hurt you, because everyone is just one. And Shinji's going like, yes, let's separate again, because love is worth the potential risk of being hurt. That relationships have a lot more positivity to give at the end of the day than the breakup, if that makes sense. It's right. Like every relationship that we get into ends at some point, and it's painful when it ends, or it doesn't end. But the risk is still worth it, because you get all these great moments from it. You get all these great dynamics going on, and it shows a picture of him and his friends together happy. I don't know how anybody can interpret the scene as negative, but just from the imagery alone. But there you have it. Yeah. People have. And then we get that, and Kaoru says that he's love and Rei and everything, and
we see all the crowds coming back, all the people coming back to being individuals, and he's just a person standing in a crowd. And then we have the Yui scene, with the nice backing track. Mother is the first other. That's what that song is called, right?
No, that's a different one. Mother is the first other. Okay. Is a much more yeah, that
one. Right. Yeah, that's a more major theme. Sorry, I thought it was the one that plays here where Yui is saying goodbye to him. And I think we also get the flashback here too, right? With Yui talking to Fuyutsuki about what she wants.
We do. So we get like Anno basically telling us what the themes are, and people still don't understand what they are.
Kind of, yeah. But it's also just explaining Yui, I think. It's just about her relationship with her son, which largely goes kind of unexplored throughout the series. So we get a little snippet of it here.
Yeah.
Basically, Yui's crazy. She wants to live forever. Until there is no more anything. She wants to be a part of the Evangelion, because it will go on after she's gone, after everyone else is gone. There'll still be Evangelion, which is an odd concept, considering the scope of this franchise and where it's taken otherwise. But the Evangelions also all kind of die here a little bit. They all kind of turn to stone statues, lifeless automatons that are just going to be monuments to this era as people go forward. So that's interesting.
Yep. It's she just wants to destroy kind of nihilism and pointlessness of the world, and it's all really a little bit insane. Yui's crazy. But we get this final speech, which is, very similar, very reminiscent, reworded though from episode 25 and 26, where it's like, even if life's really negative, it always has the possibility of being happy. Paradise is what you make it. Anything can be paradise if you
can be paradise.
Choose it to be. That sort of thing. So we just get this overtly positive, overtly happy statement, contrasted by the epilogue scene of the movie, which I think is the only reason why people maybe think that this is a negative movie, because if we had cut there and there was no final epilogue scene,
that would have been so weird.
I think people would have interpreted it universally as like a happy movie. But I'm glad that this epilogue scene is here. I think it's one of the reasons that I've thought about it and discussed it for forever and debated with people about it. It adds a lot of depth
that must have brought to your life
overall, I think, to the film.
The internet.
Oh yeah, so much fun. But
why do we do
I've
it?
always
why do
interpreted
we do
this
ourselves?
Scene.
Anyway.
The scene on the beach, I've always interpreted it very simply as Asuka is showing a moment of empathy for another person who's in pain, and Shinji is ceasing to stop hurting the other, the person that causes him pain and everything like that. And so we have Asuka stroking his cheek, which causes him to do a double take and cease, because he's kind of realizing the promise he made to himself and his mother to change, to accept pain as a kind of like inevitability with relationships, and he stops inflicting violence on those that make him feel pain. But like I said, Asuka's also kind of involved a little bit here, where there is that she's showing compassion for someone who's hurting right now.
She strokes his face while he's strangling her.
Yeah. Well, it's not a good thing. Like, Shinji is not.
No. It's obviously not a good thing.
He's not a good person for doing that,
it's
or whatever.
Him out of his weird state. I always interpreted it a little bit, possibly, as he's just in a weird flux, and he's just doing what he was doing when he was in the mirror in Instrumentality.
Yes, I kind of agree with that actually as well. I'm just saying that this is like symbolic for the character
she's showing him
as a whole.
And kindness, and he reacts to that, and then I think he sheds a tear, right, and it falls on her face, and she's like,
he cries.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
But
how disgusting.
He had the forethought though to dig a grave, or not dig a grave because he doesn't have a body, but like put up a memorial to Masato before he did this, which is kind of interesting.
Well, I think as well that the cross represented that the burden that she gave him and everything, but he's not willing to carry that burden.
Like Gendo with the shadow.
Yeah, it's like, exactly. It's like instead of it being a burden that he carries, he leaves it behind with Masato as like a grave marker, but it's like a respectful kind of thing. Like, it's like, I appreciate that this was your struggle.
Yeah,
but
I think it's also to sort of
like
reference all
four
four major characters in this last scene, because we see Rei, and we see Asuka, and we see Shinji. So then there's the grave marker for Masato.
And the final line, Kimochi Warui, I've always thought of it as a reference to the scene earlier in the film with Shinji over Asuka's bed and everything, and she's kind of remarking about that. Ano said that he added the line. Originally, actually, in an original beta version of the script, it cuts to Asuka being fully awake, and she starts kicking sand and grave markers and stuff, and then she goes, "You think you could have killed me, stupid Shinji? You can't kill me. I'm invincible." And like
thoughtful, introspective scene ended with like anime hijinks, just like total like mood breaker. Like, Baka Shinji, what are you doing?
Yeah. And Shinji's just like, "Oh my god, I have to live with this woman now."
She's the only one left. The movie ends.
But instead of doing that, he asked her, how would you react if you saw Shinji at your bedside or whatever? You woke up and she goes like, "Oh, whatever, how disgusting," or whatever. And he's like, "Perfect, that's it. We'll put it in the movie. That's a wrap."
And that's the last word. And it's really a summation of the whole franchise. How disgusting.
How disgusting, indeed.
How beautiful.
But how beautiful. And I do think it's uplifting because it shows that characters can change in this final scene, and that there is a possibility to begin that change. I don't think Ava's like, you flip a switch and suddenly you're changed. Yeah. It's very much about like
self-improvement is
realizing that you're
work.
Capable of it.
A little bit.
Yeah. And you have to work at it, but you can do it. And so I think that's,
or you have to let it happen.
That's
you have to either let
what
it happen,
it's trying to get at.
Or you have to work at it. Both are good interpretations, I think. And that's End of Evangelion.
And that's End of Evangelion.
Well, we're doing retrospective on like the themes and stuff. So we'll probably, I think what we'll probably do is we'll talk about the whole movie, like our thoughts on the whole movie, in that. So for now, thanks for listening. Check us out on Patreon. And we are going to be watching through Gilgamesh television series by Akio Satsukawa, who was a writer. He was a consultant on this film, even creative consultant. And that's been a lot of fun so far. The first episode is free, and you can check it out, and then go from there. And if you like it, subscribe, and you can watch more.
Yep.
Or listen to more.
Thanks for following us all this way. We got to talk about EOTV.
Oh yeah, we still have to talk about EOTV. We'll probably talk about the manga at some point.
EOTV,
And we'll talk
and
about maybe one of the video games at some point. And yeah, this franchise will never die. Will never destroy Evangelion. Unlike Anno, he thinks he can kill it, but he never will. It'll live on in the hearts of men and women.
Nope.
Yep.
Thank you so much
Bye.
for watching. You have a good one.